am joined by four very, very brilliant women. I did not have an exact description of the kind of people I wanted to put together, and I kept saying cool and fun and interesting. There is Laetitia. She is a lawyer turned fashion editor turned policy communications professional now. Currently, she's the director of partnerships and stakeholder engagement at India UAE CEPA Council. There is Swarnima. She's the co-founder of Gytree. All of you must know it's a women's health brand. She's been working in the space of women's health for years. There is also Sachee, who's the co-founder of that Sassy Thing, which puts women's pleasure at the center of things and makes very cool sexual wellness products. And then there's Sumedha. She is a journalist covering politics, gender, environment. She's currently with the BBC India. Before this, she worked with Wire, NewsClick. So happy to have you. Can we have a round of applause, please? So first question, your first period story.
I've never shared this before and it's hilarious and I was hoping it wouldn't get too dark. I got my first period at 13 and I hid it for an entire year successfully. And I wish I could say that the shame that one feels at 13 wouldn't be the same at 30, but unfortunately it still is. And that's why probably we're still talking about it, and we do see enough talking about periods, about menstruation, about health. There's numbers and numbers and numbers, but it's good to sort of come together and share this. So for that one entire year I would just free bleed, and we did have, and I'm saying this with access to period products, with access to sex education, with access to information about my body, about puberty. I knew all of that. And I did come from a space where I was very aware. I did have a family who would be very supportive. Even then, I felt like this huge burden of things changing or things not being the same, or this experience being very, very unpleasant for me and for my body, and just it being associated with so much shame. And it's very different from how, as a journalist, when we cover about menstruation, or when we talk about periods, there are always stories that you've seen around you in pop culture and news about it being associated with a woman's body being impure or it being polluted or etc. And those are narratives we've seen, we've heard, we've consumed. But this very real shame is something that we often sort of overlook. We don't talk about it enough. And irrespective of having access to education or just being aware about it, does not sort of register as destigmatization in our bodies and in our minds. And this is the first time I'm talking about it. And I just remember, I'm sorry that this could be a little graphic to imagine, but I just imagine my 13-year-old self putting away like cloths that I had just used over the course of that 6 months or 1 year. And when I was finally 14, I could go up to my mom and tell her that, okay, now I can tell that I've had my first period. So that 1 year, I just lied about it. And I just hid it from friends at school. And I'm now somebody who does not experience periods regularly. So she asked me that, oh, do you want to come to the period party? And the first thing I said is, I don't even have a period properly. Like, what am I going to talk about? And because so many of us experience menstruation so differently. And I'm just glad that we're here and that we're talking about it. But the experience has been largely a spectrum for so many of us. And I want to hear so much from other people now.
So I think I'm going to talk about all the events that led to my first period. I was in 9th grade when I had my first period, and I was the last girl in my girl gang to have it, and I was shamed for it also. So for the longest time, I think like for a year and a half or 2 years, I was actually told that you're not woman enough or you're not a woman. And I kept thinking, what does that even mean, man? Okay, so it started with like having a flat chest. I was always a small boobed girl, love my boobs. But yeah, like, I mean, I was shamed for my body, the fact that I never got my period, and it was confusing. I felt sad about it. I also felt like I'm not enough, to be very honest. Yeah, so that was like everything that happened before I got my first period, and I waited for it for a really long time. I got it in school, and I remember the education that we got in school was boys in one room, girls in another room, and you're taught random shit about periods, which is not accurate. It's literally like a blue liquid which is being put onto sanitary pads. So for the longest time you think like you bleed blue, like the cricket team. So it was all very overwhelming, and I don't think I was given any education at home also. The only thing was that my mom told me that हाँ ये होगा, and I was like क्या होगा, but what will happen? You'll bleed from there, that's it, and it just kind of ended there. And I was handed over a pad, like it was like the biggest secret on the planet. My mom literally opened her bathroom cupboard, and there was like the sanitary pad which was wrapped in like 30,000 layers of black poly bag. She took that out, and she was like, go to the other room, like don't let your dad or brother see, and just wear it. And I was like, okay. And I think like it was very challenging for me as I grew older and my body changed. I got PCOS in 11th grade. My period completely flipped, right? Like the cycle flipped. I didn't have periods for like 3 months altogether. And that was the scary part for me more than the first period. It was like what happens after. That was really scary, honestly, because I didn't know anything, I didn't know like how my body is gonna change, how my cycle changes, how PCOS affects everything as well. So I wish I was taught more about that when I was experiencing it also. Yeah.
My experience was kind of the opposite of what Sachee said, in terms of I was the person in my community, in my friend circle, who got periods like really, really young. So I was actually 9 years old. So like extremely early periods, and now I'm hearing it's become more and more common. But at least in our little, school or neighborhood or whatever the community was. And I was basically, at the time, I was being brought up in this small place next to Lucknow called Mela Raiganj. So I'm a UP girl, and it was a small place outside of Lucknow. And probably you can imagine a little bit of the mentality over there, which is still like the same today. So I was kind of the opposite, where like, I was tall. My puberty development was very visible to people, and my mom was very like, acha zara, loose kapde, all those kinds of things. So there was a lot of, and my parents were very taken aback by that very early menarche. They were, I think my mom, she claims now that she intended to tell me at the right time, but I mean, we'll never know, right? I mean, it just, so these days when I tell her that, you were so weird, and she'll be like, no, I would have told you, but it happened early for you. So, it was like that. And, I must say that it was a very interesting experience. When I think about it, there was nothing traumatizing about it, except that it was very painful. My mom didn't give me information all in one go. She told me things in parts, that, okay, now this is something that happens to everybody. Then the next one, when it happened again, she was like, oh, by the way, this is supposed to happen every month. Then the next one, she tells me that, oh, by the way, this is supposed to happen very predictably. So it was a year of just her giving me information in parts, okay? And I was like really young, and I think one thing that I remember was, I don't know whether you guys have this in your families and communities or not. So there was this really weird ceremony called Surya Namaskar Pranam, I'm not sure. But some male member of the family gives you Ashirwad. Yeah, like really, really weird stuff. Now, normally my dad, who's typically a cool guy, I thought, okay, it's going to be my dad. Okay, I mean, it'll just be like me, my sister, my mom, and my dad. But, like, there was this random Tauji that came to my house for a random visit. And I have seen that human being for a grand total of 3 times in my life. But because he was there at the time when this little, whatever ceremony was happening, he did it instead of my father. And I think it was as awkward for him as it was for me. And he's just, like, my sister and I still joke, okay, remember that Tauji? And we wonder, like, kahan hai wo aajkal? Who was he? Where is he? But he's now attached in my in my memory as the person who did that little weird ceremony, okay? So, and I'm saying this with a sense of humor because when I was 9 years old, and from in the ages of 9 or 10, this was a weird experience. It was confusing, it was a little funny, it was a little weird, it was painful obviously, but I was discovering it as I went. But I did notice that even in a very normal circumstances, you know, not very traumatic or whatever, I mean, the secrecy was so dramatic. I mean, just think, it was so performative, you know, that, oh my god, like, take something in a black packet, hide and go to. So, that draws more attention. You know, I mean, the secrecy was so dramatic, the secrecy was so unnecessary, it was so performative that I just thought that, okay, I have to perform it, that, you know, I'm like now a different person or something like that. Okay, then मैं आज तुम लोगों के साथ नहीं खेलूंगी because, you know, I can't tell you why or something like that. So it was a very strange experience, and it was, now that I think about it, and of course, like when my, you know, a few years later, when my other friends started getting their periods, you know, there was shame, there was a way that, you know, we had to sort of tweak the way we behave, and suddenly like uncle वहाँ पे है, पैर जरा वो करके बैठो, this and that, you know, as if whatever. So it was very weird for me that we were actually given zero information, and I just don't understand why that is. And also, there was another thing that I distinctly remember. So, like you mentioned, you know, free bleeding, right? So my dadi and dada used to live with us. So they, of course, did not have sanitary napkins in their zamana, right? So when my mom bought them for me, like there was a pitch battle between my dadi and my mom that क्या ज़रूरत है? ये सब आदतें क्यों हमने and my mom was like fighting with her that, are you mad? Like, this is okay, earlier it was not, the nowadays she's going to use, etc., etc. So what I'm essentially saying is that now that I look back at it, there were so many cultural layers. It was such a secret event, yet such a cultural event, you know. And there is such a, and this has, I think, been my hallmark of experience with women's health. Something so stigmatized, but something that so many people have an opinion on, and so many people are stakeholders of that. You know, like for example, PCOS or endometriosis, or you mentioned breast cancer, and very rightly said that, you know, it's a family discussion and not an individual discussion. So then if that were the case, why not have more conversation and more early and more scientifically? So this is a dilemma that I'm still kind of working out in my head, but that was my experience.
I grew up in Shillong, and it was an all-girls convent school in a matrilineal society. So I'll give you 3 different contexts for the period story. One is within the family, one is within the peer group, and one is within the wider community. So I got my first period when I was 12. This was 2003, you can reverse backdate my age. And so I wasn't scared. I have an older sister who's 4 years older than me, and she had already told me about it. We had access to the internet at that point, so Google was already a thing. And there was Cosmo. We all read Cosmo. At least in Shillong we did. And so the first thing I did was, I went and told my sister that my period had come. And she said, okay, give me a pad. And for her, that was that. She was like, you'll come every month. Don't stress about it. And we lived in this big joint family compound. Like 5 steps away is my mom's older sister. A few steps up is like my grandfather's sister. So it's a big kind of a family setup. So my mom's older sister called me, and then she said, in Khasi, you're a woman now. So I was like, why? And she said, no, you are. Once your period has come, you're a woman, right? That's the only reasoning. So I said, then what does that mean? She said, you should not sit on any uncle's lap anymore. Do not be alone in a room with a man anymore. And it was all very like, these were instructions without why you should do them. It was a bit confusing, I must say. But thankfully we had the internet, we had Mills and Boon, and we had Cosmos, so kind of that mystery was demystified quickly. And in the peer context, as you mentioned, when you had your period early, I had a classmate who had her period early, also at the age of 9. And in our convent school, we wore these really tight, short, white skirts for our sports days. And she had this massive red stain on her skirt at the back. And all the girls laughed, and it was quite cruel. And she had to tie her cardigan to cover it, and, you know, eventually she had to call her mom, and it was quite traumatic for her. And so you can see within the peer context, even women can be quite, they can shame other women when it comes to things that have not happened to them, which will eventually happen to them. but they shame someone who's going through it well before they quote unquote should. And in the wider community context, what I've come across, I guess, through work, through interactions with, let's say, the domestic help in the house, is that nobody really tells young girls about the connection between a period and a pregnancy. So you have this, and Meghalaya, I think, has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the country. Because of that lethal mix of being very Christian, being a matrilineal society in the sense it's still patriarchal, no doubt. But women are definitely in the public sphere a lot more. They participate in community work a lot more. So there's a lot more interaction between the sexes. And then church and all of that, and boom, we have a lot of teen pregnancies. So I've come across women who are as young as 15 or 16, and they have no idea that because their period has not come for 4 or 5 months, that they're actually probably pregnant. It's a shocker for everyone when they go into labor. So in my experience, this idea of a first period, what it means, one is obviously in my personal context, I had enough information, I had an older sister, access to internet, like a privileged setup. In the peer community, it was, I guess, okay once we all started having it at the same time, but if you deviated from the norm, even a little bit, like even the women will go for you. And in the wider community context, there was this great hush-hush kind of a situation over like what happens when you get your period and then you miss your period. So I think sex education and women's health must do the whole gamut. From the time before you get your period to the time you get it, to what happens when you miss it. It could be PCOD now, I guess it's called, right? PCOS syndrome. PCOS, and it could be pregnancy, it could be many other things. But I think women should be told that if it does not come regularly, or if it does not come at all, these are the range of things it could be, and we should systematically be able to kind of cross them off the list.
We all experience it so differently. Yet, I think one thing remains common is how overwhelmed we were, confused, shamed. To just quickly add, I think I was also in a convent missionary all-girls school with just women all around me, all the teachers were women. And still, I got it like really early again, like I think I was 9 or 10, and I skipped school every time I got my period. I was just so terrified that it's going to be a sale and people are just so mean about it, we laugh about it. So when we did decide to design the curriculum and take workshops, again the goal was never to overwhelm an 11-year-old with so much medical information that they don't know what to do, but just enough to equip them to know what is happening to them, because there's just so much change your body is going through and nobody's telling you the why. Like again, I think the only education we get in schools or from our mothers is that it's going to happen, you're going to bleed, and this is the pad, and the story ends. Literally, why is it happening? The connection to pregnancy, literally, that nobody explains. And I think we do try to cover that in our curriculum a lot, and especially what to watch out as signs of warning, right? Like how much pain is too much pain. If you're bleeding too less, when is it a cause of worry? If you're bleeding too much, when is it a cause of worry? Moving to what does it look like, in your work life in the last decade, in different professions, for example.
Having a period when I'm on a reporting assignment is the worst sort of nightmare. Even to pee is still a nightmare in the sense that I was accompanying a younger journalist who was coming with me, and she was very conscious about where she wants to be. And I said, you have no idea about the places I have had to go and just be. And then I'm so comfortable, I can now park my car on any street possible and I can just go, because like it's taken so much shame out of it now, because I'm like, if I have to go, I'll just go. I've peed on the sides of like national highways and I've been perfectly fine with it now. And it's unfortunate, as funny as it is, and in sheds, to mountains, to close to rivers. I wanted to document it at some point as to every place I've peed in, and it's hilarious. But it's unfortunate because there are no period positive spaces. And sure, as a journalist, because we're out on the field a lot, it is an occupational hazard. But what about people living there? It's equally a nightmare. It's equally a hazard because women have to travel great distances just for a safe space to change their pads or to be able to just have an access to a washroom. And everywhere in the communities that I've reported, it's an experience which sort of ties us together in knowing that if there is no clean space for you, there is no clean space for me. And a lot of spaces, public spaces, continue to not be period friendly, even if there are washrooms. I think I've only seen it in big corporate offices where in the name of being period positive, they've put that box where you can have access to sanitary products. But even in the most progressive newsrooms that I've worked at, it's not been a policy. And I think just the fact that providing tissues or sanitary napkins is seen enough by most places, but they're not exactly period positive. And definitely access continues to be an issue still, and it's saddening that we're talking about it in 2025, that if I step out now and if on the street I have to go change my pad or urinate or whatever, I wouldn't have a space and I'd have to knock at somebody's door to be able to do that in the poshest part of Delhi. So it's an important conversation, but as much as privilege has played a factor, I think it sort of translates universally with people I've reported about and worked with as well.
So I think I'm going to divvy this up into different stages. So I'll start with when I was an employee working at a company, let's say in 2011. So I was working with one of the big four giants, in internal audit. And this was back in 2011. I was on the first day of my period, I remember very clearly. I was in tremendous pain and I made it very clear, I communicated that too. And there were a bunch of 50-year-old men who made me run around across 2 floors to take out printouts, and because they needed it for a meeting, and they did not understand the pain that I was going through. They were not at all empathetic towards that, so I think that was the first bad experience at a workplace. Now, being on the other side, when I'm a founder, and I do have employees as well, right? So we have a period leave every month, which is a mandate, and we encourage people to take that leave. I know there's a lot of discussion around that also, the pros and cons of that, but I think everyone menstruates very differently and we respect that as a brand. On the other hand, I would say as a founder, it's been very challenging for me to deal with my period as well, because when I'm running a business, I have to be hands-on, running the show all the time, right? So my period is really painful. The first 2 days are horrible for me. And I think more recently, probably it's the 30s, it's become more painful than earlier, where I'm actually stuck to a bed for a whole day. It pains so much. And that has been a journey for me to navigate and be comfortable with, to take a day off, for example, because I'm always feeling that guilt or, how will I make up for not being present sort of a thing. So I think over the past 2 to 3 months, I've tried to get over that founder's guilt. And be okay with taking time off, because I realized that that's something that my body needs and I can't just neglect that because I have to run a business. So I think that's been a journey for me, because I've also had instances where I've been shunned or the pain has been diminished in certain ways, where my mom has told me things like, it's okay, thoda sa hi to tolerate it, but it's not okay, it is a lot, and your okay might not be my okay, right? Pain is so subjective. We were talking about that earlier too. So I think when pain is trivialized like that, and that happens so much more for women, sadly, it just normalizes the fact that you have to be up and running all the time. So I think for me, I've disassociated myself from that belief and tried to normalize the idea of taking rest for myself also, which has been something I've struggled with over, I would say, over the past 3-4 years. But I think I'm getting better at it now.
So, very similar experiences to what Sumedha and Sachee just said. Firstly, period positive spaces to kuch hota hi nahi hai, in India especially. It's the truth, I mean, as much as we, like, honestly, I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with some really sort of progressive organizations in terms of the work output they produce. I started my career with Discovery Channel, then UN, WHO, AstraZeneca, blah blah blah, then like my own company. So, there has been a varying attitude of my immediate reporting boss or my team or whatever. So it's very team to team, but there is no such thing as period positive or those kinds of things, or having period supplies, or even having a spacious enough, it's like you're sitting and then that dustbin in the toilet, if there is one staring at your face, it's not even covered. It's really gross. Situations are very gross. And I've also had a very traveling oriented job profile, and it's really, really horrible. I mean, there are no washrooms anywhere for women. They're just so icky, and you shouldn't go. I mean, like, I just feel that I should just, then of course I use P-Safe and all very liberally, but who knows? Yeah, I mean, whether it's potent enough for the disgusting stuff that is. So now the thing is that when it comes to periods, so I'll just divide this into two parts. One is that what has been my personal experience and how we do it. Like Sachee said, once you are a founder, there are a lot of things you can do differently. So we do that in our company. Like, we, people are feeling a little unwell during their periods, or, there are some people who come with chronic conditions. They have some pain, episodes even outside of being so we give that flexibility. I was diagnosed with a very severe endometriosis, long ago. So that, it is very interesting that, I've spoken with a lot of women who don't have PCOS, they don't have endometriosis, they don't have anything like that, but they have, or at least they've not been diagnosed so far, and they have severe period pain. And it's really dismissed. But when you say that I've got a condition, then people are, oh, okay, so you're ill, you're sick, okay, then this makes sense, So you're like, there's this book, right, Unwell Women. So you're an unwell woman, so pain is par for the course, So that, has this uneasy acceptance. And now that, with Gytree, we work with a lot of corporates. We work for women-specific health benefits for a lot of corporates. And the stories that we hear are really concerning, right? So irregular periods has become the norm. I think these days people think irregular periods is just the baseline. They don't even, they don't have the time to consider what this might mean. If the doctor is saying that they will do an ultrasound mein kuch nahi nikla, fine, that's it. That is the extent of the investigation that will happen. Where I would say both the individual and the doctor is at fault, I would say. Blood tests, people are very lazy about it. Okay, there was a period of time when after COVID people did it for a while and then they were like, whatever. People don't know what to get tested. So that's another thing. So in the workplace, I would say that the idea of female biology is a very weird thing. It's something that, do they, what are you expecting? I'm not really sure. When I talk to people, when I talk to other, founders who are men and who are our clients, and the founders of the companies who are our clients, they just don't understand when we say, so it's not that we only give benefits to women, we just have a different package for men and women, and we include some kinds of preventative things like you mentioned, for the women. It's a little different, that's about it. So I go, kyun? Just read a little bit, sometimes I say, just read a chat, you're doing AI transformation for the whole world, just ask ChatGPT, So I'm simply saying that when we think about women at work, and we think about the realities of, female biology, or not just female biology in general, we are not equipped right now to understand what that means. And I'll tell you another thing, that in my experience as well, while I've been, I've had very good bosses and good team members and everything, see, no one says this out loud. But if you take a leave or if you work from home during your periods, there is a mental note that is taken. The expectation is that you will pout. The expectation is that you will take that flight. The expectation is that, okay, fine, I'm working on painkillers, it's a very, it's serious. Oh my God, I'm hopping on painkillers. You should be very concerned if you're hopping on painkillers. But anyway, that's the reality. And one thing I will say, which is very connected to, and I think Sachee, you touched upon it, and I think Laetitia, you as well, that what are there is an entire pathology that is associated with menstruation and the menstrual experience. There's PCOS, there's endometriosis. There are, different types of like dysmenorrhea, various other things, which or just your simple deficiencies like vitamin D or whatever, things like that. These are things that do have an impact on your daily life. So when you were mentioning yoga, I was kind of agreeing quite a bit because I was diagnosed with endometriosis like when I was 25 or something. And I was very lucky to get a diagnosis, by the way. Endometriosis and other autoimmune conditions, people do not get diagnosed for decades. So I was very lucky I got diagnosed. But that did not take away the pain and things like that. And there is unfortunately no standardized management for it. So I struggled with that. But yoga helped me for 2 years. I was in a very dark place. Because pain, bleeding, it was horrible. But then, I took matters in my own hands, which most women unfortunately have to. And there is just trial and error and guesswork and something or the other, and somehow you trundle through your years and your workplaces and your all those things. So the pathologies are not understood properly, or they are understood as just a byproduct of being female, which I consider deeply problematic. Now, when you mentioned, the idea of, I think a gentleman mentioned something about, cancer rehabilitation and sexual, health and all of that. Nobody cares. Like I'm telling you something that people are like, zinda to bach jaye pehle. First thing, when I got endometriosis, I was like 24 or 25. And my gynec's first concern was, acha, shadi, bachche, this, that. I'm like, okay, that's the last of you. I'm not like talking to you ever again. I just went around looking for more, this thing. But endometriosis does cause deeply painful sex. Not for everybody, but it did for me. And I was in a relationship and we had to, and that time we did not have companies like the Sassy Thing and all. Okay. So we had to just figure it out. I mean, there were, like lubricants and things like that. But me and my partner, we just had to figure out what pleasure meant, what pain meant, what it meant for us long term. As of today, I'm very, I don't talk about it very often. I'm a prospective adoptive mom. Because earlier I was just so this thing that somebody will make a judgment that because इसको endometriosis है तभी ये women's health की company चलाती होगी. Like people, हाँ आपको तो कुछ है ना, issue है ना आपको. People have said this to me, educated people in the UN and WHO. So when I was giving my resignation, said I'm going to work on my venture full time. Like हाँ you've got issues also na. I'm like, yeah, so does your wife, भेज देना उसको, भेज देना मेरे पास, So I'm just saying that we have to, there is no option but to deal with this with a sense of humor, because what else will you do? Otherwise we'll be very angry, which is great. I think my rage has produced some really good stuff, work-wise and all of that. But it's so debilitating, to be angry all the time. So, but this anger, this frustration, the pain, the discomfort, the bloating, the heaviness, this is very normal. This is something that women are just expected to power through even today in workplaces. And we are a long way off from the idea of disease, wellness, well-being and work being together. And here I'm talking about, men as well, mental health and various other things. For example, fertility journeys, it's not easy on men either. So this idea is not enmeshed in a very healthy way. And unfortunately, women are facing the brunt of it.
I completely agree with one thing that my co-panelists have mentioned. Work culture is determined from the top. Now, whether you like it or not, the person sitting on top determines how everything is going to run. And I think it is the biggest disservice when you have a woman sitting on top who says, I'm working on painkillers, I'm hopped up on painkillers, I'm still working, everyone else should be able to do it. And it undermines pretty much everything that women across the world, across decades have been fighting for. That's one. That being said, I've actually come across the unlikeliest champions of period-safe workplaces. The first one being a Maltese Catholic priest who taught us sex ed in our convent school. Rest in peace, Father Celia. He passed away recently. He married my parents, he baptized me, and he gave us sex ed. So he was an interesting character, devoted to the Farsi people. He learned the language. He wrote multiple books on de-addiction, on sexual health and reproductive health. And because this man, right, is a patriarchal setup, the Catholic Church, this white man, we still have a colonial hangover back home. We like white people. And so this white priest stands there and takes menstrual health seriously. Now the nuns have no choice but to take it seriously. So that's an example of like leading from the top. Fortunately, again for me, I started my work life in predominantly female workspaces, Harper's Bazaar, IDEVA, and there was a lot of compassion when it came to periods. In fact, in one of my workplaces, we had like a little period hot water bottle that we passed around whenever anyone had their period, and period leave was not a problem. Though I have noticed that as you move into more traditionally male spaces, or you get the sense that if you take a period leave, like you mentioned, there is a mental check being done that, they're shirking work. The good thing about all these workspaces are they're not immune to one thing, which is peer pressure. So the moment you have an institution that deals with quote unquote the much demonized Western liberalized world, the more likely they'll at least pretend they're okay with the period leave, or the needing of like space for women when they are having a cramp and they're like, you know what, we need to go home, we can't handle it anymore, we need painkillers. So I mean, there are grades to it. And when I was working in politics, there's no space for it at all, right? I mean, well, the Northeast, barring the Northeast, in the rest of India, when you go to a political rally, it's just a bunch of men, right? I mean, you, as a woman, as soon as you step out, you'll stand out like a sore thumb. So there's no way anyone has thought about like toilets for women, let alone like a place where women can get pads during a rally or during any kind of political event. So it ranges from that to kind of these quote unquote, again, woke corporate spaces that kind of have to pretend that they care, so they have like the period products in the bathroom and they have the little extra bin that says you can put your period products in there, to the actually more safe spaces for women when they are run by women, with women at the top who are not undermining other women. So I've done the whole gamut, and I think the answer to most of this is just really a lot of peer pressure. And the only way people will budge is if a whole lot of people just push it.
We all lack is also safe, non-judgmental medical care. What did accessing medical care look like?
For me, the opportunity to bond over, I'm having cramps today, or I'm bloating, or I'm PMSing, those weren't the same things. And I used to not feel a sense of belonging with the girls at my school. I went to an all-girls school as well. And this was a big conversation dominating like free time, lunches, and people are just, and I had to just say, I'm also thinking about the period. I'm not having them, and I'm just confused as to what's going on, and parents or my mom would be worried. And I think even now I struggle with it, and I am still trying to find space where I can talk about it without, either it going on a spectrum of full panic to just me completely shutting down and pressing any conversation about it. For me, what has really worked is finding a doctor who is literally, she's I think 80, and I worry that, oh my god, like what will happen if she's not around. But she's the only professional who I felt in this entire gamut of things that she would actually sit women down, and for every patient she spent half an hour just explaining women's bodies to themselves. And that completely changed the game for me. I've been going to her since I was a child. There were long queues which would put me off, and then I just realized why it would take so long, because nobody has ever spoken to your body about in the way that she would. And just to spend time explaining what is really happening, why it's happening, not just to yourself but also to parents or partners. Just to see that kind of space was empowering. And I have PCOD, which again means that I have irregular phases. I don't know at all times as to what's really going on and should I be alarmed or not. So I think with the kind of education we have, no matter how much awareness we have, there is always this feeling of not knowing enough. And with so many like lifestyle disorders, stress, and so many other changes, clinically nobody is ever explaining to you what is going on. So I think just the lack of those spaces is what's worrisome.
Yeah, I think it begins at home, and I think that was really lacking for me because one is we've been talking about how your body changes, hormones, we've been talking about internal changes, but what happens externally, right? Like, for me, it was a lot of excessive weight gain, excessive body hair, and being shamed for that. I think Sumedha, you rightly talked about being othered in a way, right? For me, it was the othering at school also where I was bullied for all the changes my body was undergoing. But also at home, like, I had to undergo a lot of painful hair removal. And obviously I do realize my privilege, while I'm talking about that too. But I had gynecologists telling me that, you're not normal, you don't look normal, you should get rid of the hair. And I think my whole life revolved around that. I was like a teenager wearing Linkin Park loose shirts, my brother's shirts, feeling like shit all the time, being bullied all the time. And I think there was no one talking about how that affects everything in life, how you look, how other people treat you, how you're dealing with body image issues. It affects how you take yourself to, work. It affects how you present yourself in the bedroom, how you are with a partner. So I think I've been really lucky in a lot of ways where I had a very supportive partner who's sitting right here, who helped me overcome a lot of the body image issues as well. Because growing up, it was all about like shame, in terms of something that you don't even know, like why, like hormonal changes are doing certain things to your body externally. And I think not normalizing what happens outside and how you can't fix something externally when you're not fixing the root cause. I think that was the biggest problem in terms of medical care. I think it was also superficial for me. It was never about fixing the hormonal problem, but about losing weight. I understand that it's linked, okay, like lifestyle changes are linked, but it was all about losing weight because of how you look and how you should look. It was all about like, losing your facial hair because that's not normal for a woman, it's not ladylike. So I wish there was more conversation around those things, more normalization around those things, which I didn't have growing up, like I didn't have that safe space because, and sadly, like a lot of times women do that to other women, at least that's what I experienced. Like for me it was my own mother, it was a gynecologist, cousin nanny of mine who would recommend all these stupid ass hair removal treatments. I remember like, sorry trigger warning, but I would sit through 3 to 4 hours of like needles being poked into each and every hair follicle to take that out, which was just really painful, and that traumatized me for life, honestly, and I'm still kind of getting over it clearly. So I think those things should be talked about more, those experiences need to be shared more, and I wish there was such a safe space growing up, where we spoke about these things and spoke about these shared experiences and felt that it was normal and it was okay, because I did not have that growing up at all.
The good thing is, I'll start with the good parts, which is that, I think a lot of us, that uncle who told me that, you're starting a women's health company because तुम्हें कुछ issue है, he was absolutely right. And I think that the good part is that a lot of women, and men of course, I'm not saying that it's just, but primarily women, who are starting initiatives, doing advocacy work, starting companies, which is in a way, which is an attempt to rewrite their own personal experiences. And I think that's the good part. The second good part is that, now we have a lot of spaces that we can curate, at least in, actually, so like I said, I grew up in small towns around Lucknow. So Lucknow was like the epitome of cosmopolitanism when I was growing up, so you can imagine that. So even in spaces like that, there are girls who are now using the internet and, they're kind of curating spaces and they're getting some people online and talking about things. So they at least know what they don't know. So that's a good part. But the problem is, in terms of accessing care, I think Sachee nailed it. It truly sucks. And there are multiple problems, multiple reasons for this. Number one is that there are genuinely too few good doctors in India. There are too few doctors in India in terms of the doctor-patient ratio. There aren't enough doctors, unfortunately. And definitely the quality is concentrated in some geographical spaces and not in all. And this is an experiment that you can do, like all of you who travel. Go to like a small town, enter a doctor's chamber, say PCOS, she will tell you something else. Go to Janakpuri in Delhi, go to GK in Delhi. I can guarantee you will get 3 different answers, right? And then the internet will tell you something entirely different, and ChatGPT will personally tell you something entirely different. So this is the truth. So the doctors are not enough, and they are genuinely busy, overwhelmed, and they are working within a very patriarchal structure, being a pharmacological business setup where they also have their targets and various other things. So the luxury of time is not there for doctors to be as personalized as many of them would like to be. The second is, and this is specifically, I used to think this was primarily women's health, but now that I'm going deeper into chronic care and things like that, unfortunately, science does not give us those many answers. We just don't know enough. Even if you look at complicated conditions like diabetes or chronic kidney disease or whatever, it's much more visible and spoken about than say PCOS or an endometriosis or a fibromyalgia, and that makes a whole lot of difference. But there are not many answers as to why some people get it and others don't. Some people say insulin, some people blah blah blah. It's a large nexus of guesswork. Unfortunately, that is the truth. Now that these two things are the reality, individuals who are looking for care, we are trained that care and disease and wellness is about what's happening in a clinic or a hospital between you and your doctor. But it's really not. I think Sachee is exactly right. That healthcare is also all that is happening outside of the clinic. At home, in your workplace, in your marriage, in your bedroom, everywhere else, even in your radiologist. I think radiologists are worse than, they're the most judgmental people, so we just culturally are not equipped to deal with what continued care looks like, which we need in most cases, especially things like PCOS, endometriosis, any kind of cancer. You were talking about cancer. It cannot be a clinical visit to a clinical visit. Now, of course, there are some good quality chatbots that are coming, but not all of them are good. But there are some good quality AI, thingies that are coming up. Like for example, my father has chronic kidney disease. Okay, fine, the doctor is very good, everything is very fine. But there are simple queries he has on a daily basis about the food, about something about his urine, something about his swelling. Same with peace. There are small queries. Who's going to answer them? Who's going to answer them? You will ask a couple of friends. You will search on the internet. You are basically left to your own devices. And these are the small questions, the small decisions, the frustration of decision making, the expense of decision making that ultimately wears you down. And you feel as a consequence, okay, the ultrasound is largely okay, fine. Let me just stop it. Because everything else just feels like a lot. And that burden is very real. So there is no doubt that systemically there are a lot of issues. The structure within which clinicians and other health givers sort of are working is very flawed and very lacking. And then in a country like India, the arrangement of care, what is right from symptom identification to diagnosis to care protocols and management over, it's impossible. Like these gaps are not bridged. And they won't be for a long time, So yeah, it is very difficult. Unfortunately, if you have money and contacts, then you are likely to get slightly better care. If you don't have that, especially in cases of cancer, I've unfortunately witnessed it. It's very hard. It's incredibly difficult to find, a standardized quality of care, or even standardized answers for something as common as PCOS or diabetes or anything for that. So it does suck. I do agree.
My experience is not period or menstrual health related, it's actually related to female pain. So, sometime in September 2022, I slipped 3 discs in my spine, L3, L4, L4, L5, L5, S1 at once. It's probably the most painful thing I have ever been through. I went through physio, everything was fine. I started doing core training, all of that good stuff, and then I traveled. Prakshi, you follow me on Instagram. My previous job at ORF involved a lot of international travel. It looks very glamorous. It's definitely a lot of fun, but it's a huge strain when you're on long haul flights with a very bad back. So, because also it's a desk job, 13, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, it was heavy stress on the back, and I slipped the disc again in July 2023. And then began the long journey of figuring out why it was not getting better. So it went from the second slip disc, which was chronic pain, to sciatica. So clearly something was being pinched here. And my own sister is a doctor. And when I say sister, I don't mean cousin, I mean my sibling, my only sibling. And she's an ophthalmologist. And so she said, look, if your orthopedic surgeon says it's fine, I think it's fine. So I did a bunch of MRIs. When I say a bunch, I mean like I have like a suitcase full of them right now. A bunch of MRIs, X-rays, I mean, you name it. I did dry needling, I did ultrasound, excess amounts of physiotherapy, I mean, cupping, you name it. It was just not getting any better. And every time I went for another opinion, I was told that this level of pain that you say you're experiencing is normal for middle-aged, overweight men. You're none of those, right? So clearly, you're insane. So I don't like being told I'm insane. So I went at it. My parents were also getting very frustrated. I'd been put on this pharmacy load of meds, everything from aceclofenac to antidepressants, anticonvulsants that cut nerve signals. I'd been put on muscle relaxants. At one point, I was put on an opioid patch, and that was insane. And it was actually the friend I had mentioned who got her period early when we were 9. She's a doctor now, and it was her boyfriend who told her, listen, look, I don't think she's crazy. And for her peace of mind, there is this new scan called an MRN that scans your nerves and not just the soft tissue. So it's only available, I guess, in the latest MRI machines, which is here in Mahajan and one in Medanta and Gurgaon. So I remember after 1 year of this is probably, I think, April last year. So from July 2023 till April, I basically went with this bad back. So I permanently had a massage gun, that whole kit, a lumbar belt, a gel pack, which could do hot and cold, that whole pharmacy load of meds. I also took weed gummies, by the way, in desperation. That helped a little bit. But, I should have just gone for the non-THC ones that left you pain-free but not very high. And I don't even smoke, so it was an interesting journey. And then I still traveled. I still worked. I did, like I said, it looked glamorous. I did Dubai thrice, Abu Dhabi once, I went to Canberra, Africa, London. It was mad. And every time I landed, I was like, I'm going to die. I will not be able to walk out of this plane. So anyway, I went for this MRN at Mahajan Imaging, and I was in that machine for 1 hour, a little more, I guess. I don't have claustrophobia, thankfully. And I walked out, and the radiologist who conducted the scan just came out and put his hand on my shoulder. And he just said, you're in a lot of pain. And I honestly started crying, because it was the first person who acknowledged after almost 1 whole year that I was in pain. So the scan results came, and you can see on my spine the bright nerves in the spine going bright, gone. It was so pinched that I asked, as I said, my sister's a doctor, so she sent it to a bunch of neurologists, and all just said, look, she twists herself the wrong way, she can get incontinence at this point. The nerve is that pinched. So then my sister feels guilty and she's like, I'm really sorry, I didn't believe you. So she activated all her doctors' networks. And we found the one guy who was a super specialist in endoscopic microsurgery for the lumbar region in Vedanta at Gurgaon. And I had the surgery in June last year, and touch wood. The very next day, I was out and I went from that entire truckload of meds plus weed gummies to 2 paracetamols a day for 5 days, and it's done. Like, I haven't had it again. I don't think it should have taken that long for anyone to take me seriously. Nobody did, including my own sister, because she was like, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, I am an ophthalmologist. So I trust my colleagues, they know what they're saying. And I frustrated everyone at this point in my life, right? My friends were going through it with me. I could not sleep at night. My parents, my mum, who had thankfully recently retired at that point, stayed with me in Delhi for 6 to 7 months. Nothing was working. So this, I mean, you read it, right, in articles that say that, oh, female pain is ignored. There are memes on it. That, you know, when women are like on the edge of death, they're still like vacuuming the house. And when men have a cold, they're like, I'm writing my will. You know? So, I mean, this, like, female pain, there's that monologue from Fleabag, right? Yeah, that says that female pain is just something that women are expected to live with. You know, this is your fate, this is whatever, your destiny, and you're born with it, and you just have to live with it. I don't think that's true. I really think a lot more money has to go into research for female pain. And I mean, at the very outset, there should be some gender sensitization programs for just doctors. That when you're looking at a woman who says they have pain versus a man who has pain, like, why is it your bias that the woman is exaggerating? You know, and my sister told me that apparently hysteria comes from the word, from the uterus, hysterectomy, right? So I mean, our pain has always been linked to insanity. And many people thought I was insane. I know that. And everyone thought I was losing my mind. I'm glad that I had this one person who happened to be a man. You may know him actually. He was in the Tata during COVID. I'll tell you his name. And he was the only one who said, look, for her peace of mind, we'll give her this one specialized scan that you probably only get in Delhi somewhere. And that solved my problems. So all it took was one person to look at me with empathy and go like, she's not insane. She's not, and because I was put on antidepressants and anticonvulsants and I'm not depressed, it did weird things to my mood, right? Like I disassociated. Like if I saw somebody being stabbed in front of me, it would have been like watching like it on TV. You know, I lost a bunch of weight, I lost appetite. It was all a very bizarre experience. Like it did a bunch of things it should not have. And all it took was this one person to go like, she's not crazy, she's not insane. We have the medical ability to really pinpoint what's going on in clearly what is the nerve, because I had sciatic pain right now. And it worked. So I don't think it should have taken a year. And I think female pain should be taken more seriously, and more money has to go into the research of what happens to women with conditions that have been studied for men. Like a lot of the studies for diseases are done on men, but not women. So we need to have the specialized studies for women and more money being put into it.
One thing I hope comes out of this is each of us go back with a little bit more empathy, and we try to be kinder to people in our life, talk about it a little bit openly, and each of us do it, it'll probably like create like a cycle of change. So yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for your insights and for your vulnerability and stories. It really means a lot to me. Thank you for coming.